Hey everyone, welcome to the Stride to Freedom podcast. My name is Russell Benaroya, and I'm the co-founder of Stride Services, a virtual back-office bookkeeping and accounting firm serving hundreds of clients around the United States. This podcast is designed to help small business owners focus on growth and innovation. In other words, focus on those things that inspired you to start your business in the first place. We call it your genius zone. We do our job on this podcast when business owners feel like they have the trust and confidence to build the right team of partners around them that will help them grow. Thanks for joining. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Stride to Freedom podcast. I am your host, Russell Benaroya. The Stride to Freedom podcast is about helping business leaders get and stay in their zone of genius. What is your zone of genius? It is that thing that you do that is uniquely yours to own, that you do so well that people say, how do you do that? And you say, I don't know. I just do because I get energy from it. I lose track of time. And for many business leaders, it's really associated with driving growth and scale in the vision that they set out for when they started the business. So at the Stride to Freedom podcast, we bring on guests that help people get and stay in their zone of genius. Stride to Freedom is sponsored by Stride Services, a back office outsourced bookkeeping, consulting, and fractional CFO services firm. Our zone of genius is helping people use data to make better business decisions. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. Today, we are talking with Adi Klevit. Hi, Adi.
Hello, Russell. Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. Adi is the founder and CEO of Business Success Consulting Group. And it's the perfect name because Adi kind of says it like it is. And that also makes sense because Adi is an operational process and system design guru. And she has this uncanny ability to simplify the most complex problems into really manageable pieces. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of process and systems in scaling a professional service business. We have a principle at Stride, by the way, which is to relentlessly pursue the creation of the impossibly perfect machine. And what that means for us is to think about how we put in place processes and systems that will endure and scale. But there's one really big problem associated with process and systems, and Adi is going to help us untangle that. And I think as a business leader, you'll appreciate it, which is, darn people, humans are so variable. And it's the variability of humans and putting humans in the mix that makes processes and systems so important. But oftentimes, business owners wait to put those in place and then struggle with achieving the level of freedom they want for the business they desire. So Adi, are you going to help us untangle today?
Absolutely. And I agree with everything you said. And, by the way, we actually did a survey a few years ago of entrepreneurs and business owners. And the first question was, what do you like most about being a business owner? And the number one answer was freedom.
Freedom.
But then we asked about the challenges. So that's where the challenges came in with, because that freedom, it was basically, why did you want to become a business owner? What do you aspire for? What enticed you, or what do you like the most about being a business owner? And it's the freedom, but then all the barriers that come with it, right? But definitely freedom is a very important word for business owners.
I really appreciate that, because let's just level up for a second and acknowledge that for many entrepreneurs, it is that pursuit of freedom. And freedom is not just financial. Freedom is also about impact and purpose and passion and having the space to do that thing which you believe is a change you can make in the world. But so often as entrepreneurs, we create this self-imposed cage of captivity where what we thought was going to be our path to freedom becomes this path to this feeling of constraint. And I'd like to suggest today, and then I'll give you the floor, which is one way to unlock that is to put really good process and systems in place in your machine so that you're not staying up at night worrying and freaking out that you've got single points of failure and nobody knows how to do anything, which means you feel like you have to get in and do everything. That's not freedom.
No, that's exactly right.
Tell me about some scenarios where people call you in to help them. Maybe create a profile of a situation or circumstance where you're brought in to really help unlock the cage.
Sure. So, the first characteristic, we start with, let's level up, let's go into a higher level. So the common denominator is really somebody, a business owner, entrepreneur, or key executive that really has that mindset of growing the business, right? Because if you don't want to grow, you just want to be an employee in the business, then you don't really going to even go into processes and procedures, because you will just keep doing what you're doing every single day. And maybe it will happen, maybe it will not. But if you decide you want to grow the business, that's when you go, okay, I need to look at systems. And it's not just processes and procedures, it's also financial systems. Like, you help clients, right? I mean, you help businesses with it, so they can be data driven, so they can make the right decisions. So it's really a matter of, okay, I want to scale and grow. Now, can I do it myself? Do I know how to do it? Well, I've been trying to do it. It's not working. It hasn't worked. I don't have the time to do it. I need to bring some expert advice, like you were talking about the genius zone. Okay, so somebody that can actually do it, and maybe instead of it either taking years or not being done at all, in a matter of months, I can have all my processes and procedures documented. So that's really the mindset that is the common denominator of people that call us when they reach out to us. But the circumstances can be different. It can be different circumstances. Somebody is maybe facing a merger and acquisition, and they want to make sure that their processes are really well documented. So when they actually acquire another firm, it's all going to be combined together well. Maybe somebody is growing and they need to train new employees. They need to onboard new employees, and they don't have the time, or they want to train them correctly, right? It can be that they're working their 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and they want that freedom of actually having enough time to work how many hours they would like to work, and also utilize the time to expand the business and strategize and create the future. So that can be an option as well. Employee retention is a big one, because especially in the employment market that we are in right now, you want to retain your good employees. And in order to do that, they have to see that there is a process that is being followed, that there is predictability, there is consistency in operations, etc. So they feel security that the business is actually going to expand. And it's also a matter of making sure that they can do what their genius zone is, like utilize them in their genius zone, and not basically having do other things that they will become dissatisfied with what they're doing and then leave the company, right? So that would be an example of retention. Customer experience, you want to make sure you give the best customer experience. Well, you need to have processes and procedures for that. So there are many reasons within the organization, or within the growth or the stage the organization is in, that will trigger them reaching out and wanting processes and procedures. But I think the common denominator is wanting to scale, wanting to grow, understanding that in order to do that, in order to expand, they need to have systems in place.
Adi, can we fly at like a fifth grade level for a second? And so the fifth grade question that I have for you is, what are we actually talking about when we talk about processes and systems? Like processes, are we talking about task lists? With systems, are we talking about software? Can you help us understand in an approachable way what this actually means? Because I don't know if we all know.
I think it's an excellent question, because we definitely need to define it. Okay. So again, we're looking at the lowest common denominator, right? To all the systems and processes. What is it? It's basically a method of doing something repetitively in order to get the same result every single time. All right. So let's think about the process of when you wake up in the morning and you make coffee or you make tea. Okay. So let's say you make coffee. the majority of us will do the same thing over and over and over in order to get the same results, right? Sometimes we might want to improve. Sometimes we hear about somebody that's doing it another way, so we'll try it, but it's still a process with the same end result. So a process are a sequence of actions that you take. Usually you repeat them in order to get the same final result. And the final result has to be identified so we know that we actually achieved the goal and accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. So Russell, does that communicate in terms of like simplifying what a process and a system? And I'll go into it more, but just as a common denominator, does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And so can then you also draw the distinction between processes, which are a documented method or way of doing something repetitively to get a similar outcome, and then what's the difference between the process and systems? So is systems the enabling technology that allows for that to happen? And what might be like an example of a system?
Yeah. So system doesn't necessarily have to be a software. Definitely a software is a system. So there are different definitions for the word system. The way I use system is basically, again, it's a methodical way of doing something. So system and processes can be interchanged. Processes is more what we think about how you do certain actions, and that can be documented, right? But a system is basically a systematic way or a way that you're doing it that is thought of in advance and can be repeated again to get the same result. The way I look at it is the processes are part of your system. So you can have different systems, right? You can have a system of answering the phone. So there is a process of how you answer the phone, but with that, there is also how you take a message and how you transfer a caller, let's say, to a voicemail, and then how you follow up on it. So that can be a system on how you do that. You systematize, when we talk about systematizing a business. So let's say in this case, you have a system on answering the phone correctly every single time. So again, it can be interchanged with the process. You can have a system of how to record. Let's say you get paid by a credit card and you have to reconcile the credit card at the end of the day. Well, you have a system on how you do that. You have a credit card system, like a computer, if that will be part of your software. There is a process that you'll follow in order to actually reconcile the account. There is a way that you will follow in order to batch it and in order to send information to your accountant. So all of that, those are systems that you have in place. I think sometimes understanding something it's very helpful when you look at the opposite of it, like the lack of existence of systems. And then you can go, oh, okay, this is what a system is, right? So let's say you're a dental practice, okay? And you don't have a system on how to talk to a new patient. So you talk to a new patient and you ask a certain questions. Let's say I'm talking to you, I'm the receptionist, you're the new patient, and I'm asking you certain questions. I note it down on a piece of paper. Then the next patient calls and I ask different set of questions. So maybe one or two of the ones that I asked before, and then another one, and I write it on a notepad over here. And then somebody else calls and then I go, well, I'm ask something else, so there is really, it's not systematic how I actually, and I enter it into the computer at a different time, or I forget, or I write it in the different places, right? I know I'm being, it's a very simplified example, but just so we think about, okay, we don't have a system here. Let's say, but then the opposite of it is a dental practice that has a really good system on how to do the intake for new patients. So what they will do, the front desk will have a list of questions to ask, and we'll actually go through the question one by one. Let's say there are 5 of them, and note down the information, ideally on a system on the computer and their software, right? So it's set up correctly. Whenever a patient calls, it pops up on the screen. You can actually make annotations of each one of the questions. Then there are certain steps that you do in order to schedule the patient, and then in order to start the insurance, that creating all the documentation that you need for the insurance or getting the data. So that is like step by step, very predictable, very consistent for every single patient. So the experience is the same for the receptionist and also for the patient. No matter who you are, you're going to get the same experience. You're going to get asked the same questions. And of course, as you said, we are humans. So you might be calling because you need cleaning, and I might be calling because I need a root canal. It will be a different ways, decision trees, but it's very predictable. The main actions are very, very predictable. We know where the information is. We know where the data sits, how to enter it, etc. So you see the difference of confusion and order between the first example and the second one. And I think that is a key component for our listeners to think of, where do I need systems? Where do I need processes? Well, the questions to ask is your business organized? Do you feel like it's organized? You feel calm? You feel like you know where everything is or how everything is being done? Or do you have areas of confusion, uncertainty, overwhelm, overwork, inefficiency? So that's also can determine whether you have something systematized or not.
Adi, let's role practice this. I'm a business owner. Yes, but Adi, our business is different. Our business is different. Like we have all kinds of different customers and they have different needs and we invoice a certain way. I can't imagine how we could put systems and process in place. We're so different.
Russell, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I would be now
retired, free. Yeah.
And I wanted to say retired, but then I thought, I don't want to retire because I so love what I'm doing, but, I would be very, very rich. All right. So, I hear it all the time, as you can imagine, and it's fine because we all, especially as entrepreneurs, we are very proud of what we developed, of what we created, and it's our baby. And we can't even conceive of the idea that somebody else understands it or has the similar thing. And you know what? You might not. You're absolutely right. And I don't want to make less of people think that they have their own way of doing things. Absolutely. It is correct. The only thing that I would like to offer a different perspective to think about is, how can we actually take your uniqueness and find a common denominator so we can actually document it, right? So it doesn't mean that your business is the same as another CFO or bookkeeping business. I'm sure that there are things that are in common. And some people want that commonality. They want us to come in and say, okay, what are the best practices that you know because you've worked with so many accounting firms? And that's totally okay as well. But some will say, we're unique. We're a boutique company. We're whatever you want to call it. We're unique and we have our ways. Totally fine. But if we do not replicate what is so unique about your business internally, not for outside, right, purposes, internally, you will never be able to grow because you are the only one who will be able to do the invoicing. You're the only one who will be able to do the client intake. You're the only one who will ever be able to deliver. So can you imagine, I would say, Russell, okay, can you imagine if you are going to do the bookkeeping for all of your clients and then also give them advice as CFO, and you're also going to do all the sales, networking, and whatever else? I mean, you're going to collapse, right? It's not going to go anywhere. So the thing is to realize that it can be done, and that is our genius zone, because some of the things that I hear is like, well, how do you do that? Well, that's it's not a secret sauce that I don't want to share, but it is basically our processes and procedures that we developed. And I'd love for you to come and work with me and I'll show you. But it is something that this is how we train, how I train our staff, our consultants, so they can duplicate what I do, so we can actually extract that information, figure out what is the common denominator, and figure out how we can actually write it out in a way that can be duplicated, can achieve the consistency, it's replicable. It's like there is a lot of things that can be done and still maintain the uniqueness. Does that make sense?
It does. If you're listening to the show, if someone was listening to the show, Adi, and wanted to do a little self-assessment, mm-hmm. You gave a couple of clues already, like, hey, ask yourself, do you feel organized? Or ask yourself, like, where might there be some common denominators? Is there like a little self-assessment that you might share where you'd say, hey, ask yourself these few questions, and that might be a good trigger with whether or not a firm like yours can be helpful?
Sure, of course. So the first question that I will ask is, do you want to grow?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be really honest with yourself. Like, do you want to grow the business, or do you want to remain a solopreneur, or even a solopreneur with like 5 employees, or whatever it is, right? Do you want to grow? Do you honestly want to grow? That's the first question. The second question is, are you willing to change the way things are being done right now in order to grow? Not necessarily change your product or your services, but are you willing to do something different in terms of the management of the firm? Are you willing to do something different in terms of the way that you approach things, in terms of like actually getting help, right? So in terms of delegating and hiring and expanding. And Russell, I know you help businesses with that in terms of not just the bookkeeping and the CFO, but also consulting them and getting them to see the vision, the strategy, and really work with them on that. So that is definitely, if the answer is yes, I want to grow, but I'm not sure, they probably should contact you and you walk them through that. And then we get to the point where they go, okay, yes, I want to grow, I want to scale, and I'm willing to do what it takes in order to do that, right? And I know I have a strategy on how to do that. So then the next question to ask is, which area in your company, if you had well-documented processes and procedures, will get you the biggest return on investment? Now, let's talk about return on investment for a second. Return on investment is not just money. I mean, obviously, at the end, you want to get to more profitability, right? But return on investment can be, I now get to spend more time with my family that I haven't seen. Let's say I work 80 hours a week. I can now work 60 or 40 and 20, whatever. Can I have return on investment is to basically have the lifestyle that I want with the income that I want, right? Return on investment can be that now my employees are not quitting on me. Maybe I have that problem of I can't retain good employees, and now I have great retention and I have a great team. That's also, I'm not able to hire the right team, and now I have a great team. That's a great return on investment, right? Or getting constantly 5-star reviews on Google. That's a return on investment because the customer is actually experiencing the right customer journey. I mean, obviously it will all translate to more income, more profitability, but not just saying, well, yeah, the return on investment is I'm going to make another, I'm going to grow my business by 20%. Those are great numbers that we like to throw out there. But what I would challenge our listeners is to really qualify and quantify the return on investment, and not just make it generic. Yes, I want to grow my business by 20%, but what is it really? What are the milestones to get to that 20% profitability, increase in profitability?
But I'm so sorry.
Oh,
You were just breathing and pausing. Let me interject one quick observation. I bet there are few people listening that would say, no, I don't want to grow, right? I think there's a disposition for growth. However, growth is not a linear concept. And so what I'm hearing you assert, Adi, is it's not just do you want to grow, but are you willing to take the step function necessary and the requisite investment to grow at a different trajectory? And we've learned this, as I'm sure many businesses do, which is to go from 1 million to 3 million, from 3 million to 10 million. That is a fundamentally different organizational design, systems, and processes. That's the commitment.
That's true. That is so true. Because you can get, let's say your capacity, you can get to 1 million by yourself or with a little bit of help. But then if you want to grow it to 3, 10, 20, 30, etc., you need an organization around you. You need to be able, even our example of the dental practice, like a solo dentist can do, maybe a really good one can get to 2 million, depends on if they're specialists or not. But let's say you get to 2 million with good hygiene, with good assistance, etc. But what about the future? Do you want to grow more than that? You have to bring associates, right? Do you want to take a vacation? Do you want to live the lifestyle that you want? And not necessarily the retirement and doing nothing, but maybe you want to travel somewhere and help people somewhere else, right? Or maybe you want to start another business. All of that takes time. And if you are a slave to your business, you are basically a very high paid employee of your business, you're going to have a problem achieving those things. So that's why, to your point, is like really the question is really, what do you want and why do you want it?
Yeah. And let's just be objectively honest that you may be more profitable at a $2 million business than you're going to be at a $3 or $4 million business, but not as profitable as you'll be at a $5 to $6 million business, because some of the investment to make to get on that new trajectory does take time to be fully realized. And it is a willingness to make that commitment and a preparedness to do so. I'm sharing from experience.
No, for sure. For sure. I agree. And it's also, but it's an investment. It's not spending, right? Because
yes.
Yeah,
it's not spending, because as my business partner likes to say, there are no expenses in business. There are only investments. There are only investments.
Correct. I mean, I guess there could be if you're just wasting money, that can be viewed as an expense, but if you're smart about it and you are advising them, it will be definitely, I'm with you. It's investment. And, it's also, you look at it, it's investment in the future, because a $3 million business will be worth more than $1 million business. And probably a $3 million business will be something that can be sold, whereas a $1 million business, not always, because it's more dependent on an individual. If you're a service provider, that's usually what I encounter, right? Is like, it's very dependent on an individual that can actually create that revenue. But as you start growing, and then you are forced to have the systems in place so you can actually have a second provider, a third provider, the support staff that you need. That's where you really make sure the systems are in place. And that's something that can be created again and again. And that has value as well.
Adi, talk to me about the way you respond to this question or concern, which is, hey, the plane is already in the air. Like, we're already flying as a business, and we're now going to be doing some rebuilding of the plane while it's in the air. What do I need to be prepared for as a business owner when your group comes in? How disruptive is it? Who's involved? Do we need to figure out how to land the plane before it can take off again? Tell me about how to think about preparedness for your impact.
Sure. So, what we do, and the number one rule is, if you already have a successful business, if you're already flying, you are above the 10,000 feet, you are there flying to your destination, we do not go, it's going to be very gentle in terms of the changes and what we look at. And we are very careful not to change anything, right? That's very important to us, because we're not there to tell you how to do things. We are there to observe, to learn, to document, and then make suggestions. But the suggestions that we make, that's what we document first, because if it makes any, like, you can see if the plane is actually going to go faster because of our suggestions. But if there's going to be any deviations, then it's a problem. We don't want to, because you're already successful, right? So we really take care we don't come there and say, okay, well, now we're going to change everything. No, the plane is in the air. Let's get it to the destination. We have so much at stake here. We have, I don't know how many passengers in 300, 200, who knows how many passengers, but let's say it's a full plane, right? So there is a lot of at stake, and we don't want to mess with it. So we definitely observe very carefully, document, understand why you are doing each step that you are doing. And that's very important, is to really get the why behind each step, because that step you might look, oh, well, you know what, this is a waste of time, I don't want to do that. So let's take an example. Let's say the way that your receptionist answered the phone, let's say, she spends 10 seconds, chit-chatting with the customer, and you go like, okay, this is like, okay, I can save this 10 seconds because 10 seconds time, this many customers, etc. We should just like, go directly to ask the questionnaire. And then you see that, you're not getting as many bookings. Why? Well, there was a change here. This was something that has been done for the last 10 years. And there is something here that maybe that's what the customers tell each other. Oh, wow, when you call in, they really care about you. So we need to understand why each step of the procedure is actually being done before we make any changes, especially if the plane is in the air. Now, if the plane is didn't take off, or can't get above the 10,000 feet, or has a hard time reaching the destination, then we'll do more of action. We'll take actions that to see what's happening here, and that's also you from the business coaching part, and working with data and understanding. It's not just our component. There is a whole holistic view of the business, right? So the point, I know this is a long answer to basically saying, is it really depends what stage you are at. And if you have something that is going, you have something that is working really well, we are there to not change it, but to replicate it, right? To really identify the points that actually got you to fly the plane that fast. Because there might be a whole, you can look at it as a whole ocean of reasons of things that you are doing. But you bring us on to actually identify what are the main drops inside that ocean that can actually get you to the destination every single time in the most efficient way. Because it might be that you're flying this plane, but the next one takes off and then it doesn't arrive to the destination. And then another one doesn't even take off, right? So is it a fluke? Is it just luck? Or is it like really you know what you're doing? And that's where we come in to actually identify those steps. So every single time you start, you're starting to take off, you're going to arrive at your destination at the exact amount of time, safely and correctly.
Adi, how do companies work with you? Do you tend to work on a project basis for a fixed period of time? How does it work?
So it depends on what is needed. If they want to only document a portion of the company, that would be a project. I mean, they're all projects, but there are projects that take 3 months. There are projects that take a year. It really depends on the what the company wants. And the way that we usually work is, unless it's really a specific project, hey, I want to document my sales process, and go, okay, so then it would be a fixed price and this is what we do. But if you want to work on the entire organization, including also implementation, because that's big. I mean, we didn't talk about that, but there is no point in writing processes and procedures without actually implementing it. Because what's the point? You can create the most beautiful processes and nobody uses them. So there is a problem, right? So we always work on the implementation and making sure they're being followed by all, and everybody it's basically being part of the culture of the organization now to use processes and procedures in order to deal with issues, deal with problems, deal with, whatever. It's part of the habit of the organization. And I can have a whole talk about that as well. But if you want the entire package of the designing the processes, creating them, and implementing, then we basically work, it's more of a month-to-month engagement. So it's like, let's say we have an engagement, we say, okay, we assess the scope of work and say, this is probably will take about 9 to 12 months, and we charge monthly.
Adi, we use Asana at Stride to manage not all, but most of our processes. It creates a lot of transparency around workflow. And there are technologies that have come out over the last couple of years that really help organizations get visibility around process and cross-functional workflows. Are there any pieces of software that you've found like if somebody was like, yeah, I'd love to try some stuff, or I'd like to create a little bit more improvement in my workflow, and I'd love a piece of software. Are there any software solutions out there that you're like, we really like these or have found these to be particularly useful?
Absolutely. And there can be different categories. So in terms of the processes, there are two types of software. So there is the task management, and that's Asana.
Yeah.
I love Asana. Monday, ClickUp, those are, and I use it internally as well to manage workflows. I have my workflows very well identified within the company. So let's say a podcast, you're a podcaster, so am I. You're going to be a guest on mine next week. I have a whole process, just like you do, on how to schedule guests, how to prepare for the interview, how to all the post-interview and the follow-up, etc. So we have a whole workflow. We personally use ClickUp. So we have it, which is very similar to Asana. We have a workflow, and then my assistant can go in, he does whatever he needs to do. Then our podcast producers do whatever they need to do. My marketing person then goes and she follows up on her steps. So this is a workflow management, which is very important. And it has to be based over your process. It has to be based on your processes. We have also a whole category of software that we use internally and also documenting processes for clients, which is basically the platform where it's your knowledge base, right? So think about it like a textbook, so let's say, for instance, you're taking a class, you have a textbook, and the textbook is organized in a way that is easy to follow and very easy to find. And probably, you look at it more like an electronic textbook where you have a great search function, where you can assign different parts of the knowledge to different people to review and read. It has version control, which is very important. It has different levels of ability to assign different levels of users. So you can have an admin, you can have a person that can just read, you can have a person that can make suggestions. You also should have, that particular software should also have the function of periodical review. So you basically like a periodic review where you actually every 6 months it triggers you to go in and review the processes, so they kept alive and they're basically actually being reviewed. It also has the functionality of signing off on processes. So when you have a new employee, you know that they are actually going through it. Ideally, they will also have a testing ability, so you can actually test the employee, quizzes, practical exercise, etc. So that kind of a software is different than the task management software. And yes, you can use a task management software and you can create your processes there. You can keep it there, but it's a little bit, those are two different platforms, right? So the one that I would recommend, I would recommend both. You definitely have to have your task management. I would not be able to function and run my business without a task management software, because that's where we live. That's how we communicate, etc. So the other one, that the task document or the process documentation platform, there are several that I really like. I like Sweet Process, I like usewell.io, and I like Trenial. Those are my three favorite ones. I have experience with all of them. I'm a certified consultant for Trenial. I've done many projects on Whale, many projects on Sweet Process. We know the ins and outs of all of those software, but I definitely recommend having a software, a process documentation software, and not just put it in folders in Google Drive or whatnot, or because that is dangerous, because you can lose the information. There is no version control, and it's hard to find. The searchability is not as robust as one of those platforms. And on those platforms, it has the templates basically on how to create good processes. So it's very easy. It's nice. You can actually, you see that and you go, oh yeah, I want to learn more about it, as opposed to reading like a 3-page document. And you can integrate videos, screenshots, links to a podcast, for instance, so you can actually use all the methods of learning within the platform. That makes it very easy to understand and use.
Perfect. Love it, Adi. Last question for you, which is putting it back on you. And that is, what is a question that you wish people asked you that they typically don't, but you'd love to use it as a springboard to share something about why what you do is important, or a little bit more about you, or get under the hood of what it means to run a business like yours and support the kind of clients you do?
I would love for people to talk about the future, like a year from now. And I'm the one who is asking that question, but I'd like to start every conversation with, okay, so let's say we are doing this project together. So a year from now, what should I expect? And of course, I would like to hear from what the expectations are, but I'd like to also paint the ideal situation or the ideal outcome and see if that is something that person is interested in, right? Because the ideal outcome should be that you're now able, and I'm mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, but you're now able to really live the lifestyle that you want with the income that you want, right? Because it's not always like, okay, I want free time. No, you might want to start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more businesses, right? You might want to volunteer. You might want to spend more time with your family, right? But that will be an ideal outcome. Another ideal outcome will be that, you are able to hire the people that you want, because you can sometimes, like, for instance, I'll give you an example. I have a client. We just finished a project for them, and they are a property management company. And before we start working with them, they had to hire people with experience, but didn't necessarily align with their core values and their culture, because they needed the experience. They needed somebody to actually execute the processes that were not written, or come with some knowledge of processes, because they weren't able to train on the processes, because you just have to bring somebody with experience. And after we actually documented and created that uniform procedures based on, it was 7 property managers getting their information, sitting them together in a room, combining it all together, and creating the ABC company way on how to do things, and get the agreement, that the owner said, wow, now I can hire people that actually align with my core values, that actually fit our culture, because I can train anyone. And I think that is an ideal outcome that I would like to see for every single client, because that tells it all. Then you can really be in control of your business. You can really get that freedom that you so want, because you have a machine that you can drive. You have a car, a really nice, beautiful, expensive car, or whatever car you want, that you can drive very expertly, and you don't feel like the car is like, there are things there that you don't really understand, and sometimes it does things that you're not in control of.
You were the perfect guest for the Stride to Freedom podcast, because that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about freedom, and freedom unlocks in so many different ways. And where I think it unlocks with the greatest amount of impact and scale across the organization is oftentimes that area that many business owners just don't want to pay attention to, or don't put energy, because it's not their genius zone. In fact, for many CEOs, this is the biggest area of energy drain, but it is also the place where they're going to get the most leverage. And I'm so happy that BSCG, Business Success Consulting Group, is here to help clients do that in a way that feels really approachable and achievable.
Thank you. It's an analogy to that is like a kitchen remodel, right? I mean, you have to be willing to go through it. It's painful not having a kitchen, and and going through the dust and the noise and everything. But at the end, the final result, if you really design it correctly, you're going to get the kitchen of your dreams that will stay there for years to come. And you go, okay, it was worth it. So it's either you're going to do it yourself, or you hire a professional. And that's also the choice that people can have. But I agree with you. We are, as business owners, we are like more tend to be the visionaries, the wanting to go out there and talk to people, and it's great. But like you said at the beginning, to get freedom, stay in your genius zone, but do the other things that you need to do in a business in order to be successful.
Adi, thank you so much for being here today. I wanted to unlock this topic of process and systems. Like I said, you were the perfect contributor to the topic. Thank you, everybody, for listening this week. I'm Russell Benaroya. This was the Stride to Freedom podcast. We will see you on the next show. Have a good day. Thanks again, Adi.
Thank you.
Bye.